We are recording. So just this is a meeting of the Just Transition Subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council, March 4th, 2021. Take it away, Sue.
Thank you. And I am Sue Minter, co-chair with Sarah Phillips. And we are just I'm going to walk through the agenda quickly, and then we're going to review and approve the minutes of our last meeting. We're going to give our director of the Climate Council, Jane, time for any updates. We're going to welcome the new members of our council or of our subcommittee simply by doing basically introductions, both introducing to you and vice versa. We are going to then actually move to maybe finalize an expanded list of our membership. And we're then going to have a report from a small group that I was a part of looking at strategies for early engagement on this work. We're going to then talk briefly about, our task of thinking about the equity lens that we're trying to provide. And then we're going to look at goals for our next meeting and allow time for public comment. So is there any changes to that agenda? Sarah.
I realize we do need to actually schedule our next meeting, so let's not forget to do that.
Okay, so it's goals and scheduling for next meeting. Hi, Virginie. We are just about to begin. I've just walked through our agenda. And before we proceed, I do want to check in on the members of the committee that last met, the subcouncil. We want to just get an approval of the minutes as they've been presented. Any questions or thoughts or comments about the minutes? They were posted. Now we're decision making by consensus, so I'm not going to ask for a vote. I'm just going to offer if there are any questions or challenges. And hearing none, I'll say that we are now in approving of those minutes. Does that work? Okay. Jane, welcome. You got here just in time for your moment in the sun with us before we actually do our little introductions around the corner. So Jane, you can introduce yourself to everyone because we do have an expanded group. And for those just arriving, we're going to do introductions around. But Jane is the director of our effort, and is every meeting we're going to start off with moment for her to share whatever needs to happen. So go for it, Jane.
Hi, everybody. Happy afternoon. Thank you for this moment in the sun. I like that because if I feel it outside, I want to be in it. So I'll take it. Thank you. I'm just going to run through a couple of process updates quickly, and then let you get into the meeting, and then I'll sit in and happily offer perspective as needed. So I wanted to let you all know, as I know it's been particularly challenging for many of you around sort of process, that myself and Melissa have a really solid draft of sort of a cheat sheet, if you will, on process that we're going to share with the steering committee first and then out to the subcommittees. But hopefully it will provide much clearer guidance and also sort of simplify the process of like who you're sending things to and how we're approving and moving forward with agendas, minutes, and all of the video recordings and everything like that. And as you all are bearing witness to, we're sort of building the train as we're barreling down the tracks. So I feel that, and I know you all feel it in your limited capacity trying to support such a monumental effort. So that is drafted now, and that'll be available to you all next week. And I look forward to sort of working with you all to perfect that process, recognizing that I'm sure you'll have great feedback to the document we share with you all too. So that'll be coming, and I can offer to walk through that for a few minutes with you at the next meeting. And then I also wanted to suggest, as you're working on finalizing the subcommittee charter description, that one of the things that will be asked of you next week that we're also working on is as you develop a work plan, I'm trying to provide you all some materials to make that easier, to recognize what you're required as a subcommittee to do in the statute and what you're welcome to do above and beyond to do to meet what you see as your charge for this group. So what we've done in order to do that is create a template for sort of a guidance on a work planning process, and specifically trying to put forward for the next full climate council meeting at the end of the month is building separate Gantt charts for all the subcommittees' work plans to then feed into a recognition of the timeline in front of us for the larger climate action plan and how it all sort of comes together. So I have drafted a template Gantt chart for you all to see this individual work priorities of your group, and then all you would do is plug in like when you anticipate starting which one and when you would finish, and you'll see these hard deadlines in that around the public engagement in June, recognizing we'll likely start that in other capacities sooner, but then the timelines for a draft plan and a final plan and all of that. And so that's all moving fast, as well as the at the steering committee meeting that we just hopped off of, that Chris Campany was on with me also. I think if he's not on yet, he's coming. He had to make a phone call, I saw, to a staffer before jumping on this meeting. But what we did talk about was recognition that you guys are all staffing up with your subcommittees now, which is really excellent, and that we'll probably need to do some retraining around the open meeting law and public records law for the full subcommittees now. And rather than asking you all to sit through that again, knowing that many of the counselors have already been through that, that I am going to be sending out an email tomorrow, hopefully, that will reference and include all the videos from the original council meeting back in November or December that you had the training on that, as well as the PowerPoints, and then ask you that to make space for at your next subcommittee meeting a chance for the general counsel of A&R to sit in and answer any questions that have come up for subcommittee members, and have a little bit more of a refined dialogue specific to your subcommittee around applications of the open meeting law, and specifically thinking about email and the challenges with email and what you can and can't do in email. And then recognizing also the Public Records Act. So hopefully that will be helpful. And folks who have already been through it can watch it again if they want, or just sit in and participate in the conversation later on with the general counsel. So those are sort of the things that are coming, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that now, and also speak to them as they come up, and hopefully guide the work that you're doing today to bring folks on board.
Thanks, Kelly. Did you want to ask a question?
I think you're muted, Kelly. It's funny because you're not muted. I saw that. Now.
Yeah, we can't hear you. I don't know why. Kelly, this has happened to me once, and if I went out and came back in, it helped.
Yes. It's like the turn off the computer.
She's typing her question. Brilliant. And then you might want to go out and in again.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane. I now note that in our next meeting, you've added, we're going to do open meeting law review. I just want to make sure I heard that right. And we're going to, I wanted to ask the question because we haven't convened around our charter specifically yet, and we're planning to do that a week from today. And I want to make sure that timeline is okay, or were we supposed to get that done before somehow?
I think that's great timeline. In fact, I think that makes a lot of sense with the tools that are coming for you next week.
I cannot read my chat, but somebody else probably can.
Kelly asked about the consensus model as well as in a training, and that didn't come up today, but I think that is a great suggestion. So I'll put some thought into that.
Thank you, Kelly. Very good idea, seeing as how I didn't know how to accept the minutes of the meeting officially as a consensus group, but I do have background in training in consensus decision-making as a student at a Quaker school. Any other question for Jane before we move on? Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I'm always raising my real hand. I haven't quite adapted to the Teams meeting. So I know that Sue and I, we haven't yet scheduled our meeting next week. When exactly do we anticipate getting those tools? Because I think Sue and I might want to look at them before we finalize and post our agenda. So
Mm-hmm. They're all drafted, and I've just been having some back and forth with Secretary Moore on them. So I hope, and maybe by tomorrow night, at the end of the week, but at the latest, it would be Monday.
Great, thank you.
I don't think Sarah wants to talk to me before Monday anyway.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
What is the status of the inquiry into the use of Zoom?
Yeah, Chris just bowed out of the steering committee a few minutes early, but we did talk about that also. And thank you for that. We internally have been talking about it as a state and the capacity of the state to support Zoom. And our preference was, because we have selected a facilitator and we're in the process of negotiating the contract with that facilitator, that our preference has been, since the state does not have the capacity to support a different platform other than Teams, is to kick the can to when we have the facilitator on board. And if which we expect to be next week, and then to recognize that if we switched platforms, that there would have to be support via the facilitator to the new platform that we move towards. And our hope and anticipation is there's such a push and a groundswell for Zoom that that would be, and recognizing who the facilitator is, CBI, we're negotiating with them right now around the contract. That's their preferred preference of a platform. That our expectation is that when and if they're on board, that we could hopefully consider with them their support of helping us move into using Zoom. And specifically, I guess it's Zoom webinar, I think, is what I'm hearing from most people is the platform of choice. Not knowing Zoom that well, but that's the one I've heard is the best.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Jane. Any last questions before we move on? And I'm going to keep us moving because we're covering a lot, of course. And I want to just make space right now to have us introduce ourselves to one another. And I will start by just saying I'm Sue Minter, and I'm the Executive Director of Capstone Community Action, and have been appointed to the Climate Council, I guess, by the Senate to represent community action and specifically low-income communities in this discussion. So pleased to be able to be on this subcommittee with all of you. I'm going to hand it to Sarah, and first we'll go around quickly with the people who are, council members, and then we'll expand it to the new invitees and members. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sue. And maybe we can just tag each other in as we go. So I'm Sarah Phillips. I'm co-chairing this subcommittee with Sue Minter. I'm the director at the Office of Economic Opportunity, which sits in the Department for Children and Families and the Agency of Human Services. And glad to be working together with all of you. And I will tag in Kelly.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Oh, I know my camera does this weird thing where it gets dark, but at least you can hear me. I'm Kelly Klein. I'm the owner and CEO of Grunfell Meadery and Havoc Mead based in St. Albans, Vermont. And I'm a council member as a representative for small businesses in Vermont. Let's see, Chris, I'll hand it to you.
Hi, I'm Chris Campany. I'm Executive Director of the Wyndham Regional Commission, based in Brattleboro, Vermont. We cover 27 towns in Southeast Vermont. And I was appointed by the House to House Speaker to represent, I forget the specific term, but basically it's municipal concerns. And let's see, do we have another council member left that we haven't tagged yet?
Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Micah. Oh, hi. I'm Jennifer Micah, General Counsel for the Department for Children and Families, and I was asked by Commissioner Brown to be on this subcommittee. I have experience in the mental health field and in the developmental disability field, and now I'm in DCF, so I have a sort of a broader view of some of the systems and how they support people with sort of who are marginalized groups and that sort of thing. So, and I'm very happy to be here because I am very interested in this particular topic and area. So glad to be here.
Great. And so now I'm going to turn next to sort of the new folks who we've invited to join us. And then I will also give a moment for our staff of this subcommittee to introduce themselves. And if possible, the way Kelly did, if you can come on screen. I know not everybody can. It's always great to see faces. So thank you so much for being willing to join this effort. I believe we're going to get to hear from Nadia, Virginie. We did hear from Beverly, who can't be here today. I'm hoping we have Iris and Nadia with us. I see Nadia right in front of me. So Nadia, just give us a little bit about you and what you do, what brings you here, and what interests you in this topic. Thank you.
Great, and thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Nadia Marquez Pabst, and I reside in Manchester Center, where I work as a law clerk at the law offices of Wilmington, Campbell, Benton, Stasny. Prior to joining the firm, I worked at Cruise Automation, which is a self-driving car company owned by General Motors and Honda that's focused on deploying an all-electric, zero-emissions transportation fleet. So here, in addition to working on updating some outmoded rules and regs for the transportation sector, I also worked on EV infrastructure planning, as well as initiatives pertaining to the future of work. So the ways in which automation would not only impact the jobs of today, but also the workforce of tomorrow. Prior to Cruise, I worked at Advanced Microgrid Solutions, which is an energy storage company focused on not only the integration of these generation assets, but also the ways in which they can best serve low-income, grid-vulnerable, and disadvantaged communities. And then finally, I also worked at NextEra Energy and Florida Power and Light. They are the world's largest wind and solar company, the largest electric utility in the nation, as well as a leader in nuclear and natural gas, so really an all-of-the-above energy model. I've worked under the mentorship of 2 former presidents to the California Public Utilities Commission, and I'm very excited to join this initiative. I think what I'm most focused on is ensuring that, again, kind of on the issues of the future of work, ensuring that as we reach our climate goals, they really put people first and ensure the livelihood of Vermonters. So thank you again.
Wow, I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you.
That's a lot of different experiences to bring to our table. So wonderful. And including being from Manchester, because we're really trying to expand beyond Burlington and the I-89 corridor. The next person in front of me is Virginie. And I would love for you to say a few words about who you are and what brings you to our table. Thanks.
Hi, so my name is Virginie Diambou, and I'm not going to have as much background as Nadia detailed it. So I am originally from the Republic of Congo. I've been in Vermont for 15 years, just enough to be able to speak English. I speak French. I am a physician from the Congo. Could not transfer my trade credentials here, so I worked at in many different medical facilities in Burlington, and I have been recently hired as a racial equity director for with CVOU, with Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. I have been invited to join this committee by Sue. I'm really excited, and I'm willing to learn and to contribute as much as I can. I'm not really familiar with the topic, but I'm, absolutely willing to share what I can. Thank you.
Thank you. And what's wonderful is your networks and your experiences with communities that we may not be otherwise connecting with, like New American communities. So wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
I am wondering if Kitiara is here, if I'm even saying that right. Not seeing. And what about Iris? Yay!
Yeah, I'm here. I'm Iris Chung. I'm a student at Essex High School. And so I'm also involved in a bunch of student networks. There's Youth Lobby, the Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network, and then the Vermont Student Network. I am also on the EWSD school board, and I'm really excited about this because my passion is right in the intersection of racism and climate change work. So this is all the things that I care about and want to make a difference in. Yeah.
Sue, I think you're muted, but I'm also going to use this as a moment to say, Iris, I'm not sure everyone necessarily knows what the youth lobby is. Could you just say a brief bit about that?
Yeah, so basically it's a student organization that's focused on youth issues, especially climate change, because that's the thing that we're going to be thinking about and dealing with for the next rest of our lives. So, yeah.
So I just want to do one more call out. If either Beverly or Kitiara are here, please introduce yourself. And if not, I'm going to turn it to staff. So Liz Shields, you're right in front of me. Why don't you kick it off?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz, and I am here representing the Department of Environmental Conservation, and I am an Eco AmeriCorps member with the department, and I am bringing kind of an environmental justice lens. That's my background and my interest. So yeah, also super happy to be here.
Great. I saw Ross. Are you still here, Ross? You want to say hello?
I am. Thank you, Sue. Ross McDonald. I'm with the Agency of Transportation, the Public Transit Program Manager. And as you can imagine, we work on equity issues and improving mobility options for Vermonters throughout the state. Also, really looking forward to serving the staff, serving the committee, and seeing how we can work together. So thanks for having me. And we'll see. We'll go from here. Iris, I must say, the youth lobby is something our 16-year-old daughter just brought to us, and she's interested in joining. So that was really a good connection to see.
Great. Abby, I think I just saw you may have been able to join.
I did. Sorry to be a few minutes late today. I'm Abby Willard. I work as the director of the Ag Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and excited to be staff support to the subcommittee. My work generally entails doing promotion of local food and supporting ag and food businesses, doing market access, both out of state and feeding Vermonters in state. So really excited to be engaged and supportive of the environmental justice work of this subcommittee.
Great.
I'm glad the whole group's here. It's exciting.
Yay. Well, we're not fully here, so we still, that just takes us. Now, did I miss any other staff? Yes, Amanda Carlson, who is Capstone. Would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Carlson, and I work with Sue at Capstone Community Action. I was working with her, or I was working in the weatherization department, and I got pulled in to work on this climate council and just kind of be a general assistant. And I'm very passionate about climate change and have had a lot of different life experiences that I can hope contribute to this committee. And if you need to share any documents with anyone, I'm the person you share them to, and I will put my email address in the chat notes. Nice to meet you all.
And Amanda has been taking copious notes for us and making sure everything we do is well documented. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, I think that summarizes all of us. And I'm sorry that we're rushing our introduction. I promise at our next meeting, we'll have a little bit more meaningful time to just get to know one another. But we're going to move forward because we aren't quite a complete committee yet. So as many of you know, we started, there were something like 360 people whose names got advanced for the various subcommittees, and I think something like 60 were for this committee, and we've narrowed it down, and we've included all of you, and we still have 2 or 3 more possible slots, and Sarah's going to share the spreadsheet that kind of shows where we left off. People were going to follow up with other possible nominations, and we'd like to just sort of find out what we've learned. And I'll start at the top. Aris, I believe Amanda and I reached out to Aris, who expressed being extremely busy and doesn't really have time, but absolutely wants to do this. I have a feeling she's one of those very busy people that will make time for this because she's very passionate about it. Kaya Morris, now I believe both Kelly and I reached out to Kaya. Kelly, did you want to share any of what you learned?
Sure, I can just, I was able to speak to her this afternoon. She's definitely interested. She definitely has the time. I even mentioned the time frame of when we think we'll be meeting, and she said that that would probably work, though different days of the week are different. But one of the things that she would be able to bring to our committee is that she's leading a table of BIPOC Vermonters with shared expertise, working on creating a new and just economy, and having that access to a whole group of other people who can bring their thoughts to this committee through her. I thought that was a really powerful thing that she has to offer. Let me see what else. Oh, she also, as a former legislator, has a lot of experience with the policymaking process and government systems and things like that. In fact, the reason she can't be here right now is that she's testifying right now on racial justice in policymaking. So at the State House, I think, or probably not physically there, but on a video call. So that's sort of a quick summary of my conversation with her, that she certainly seems like a great candidate.
Yeah, thank you. And I was so excited that she actually does feel that she can commit her time to this, which is wonderful. I can report also on Abel Luna, who is with Migrant Justice, who is also quite interested. We talked about climate and how the climate crisis is really affecting the migrant community in Vermont and, of course, across the globe, because many of the people here are essentially fleeing their home communities because of the inability due to climate disruption in the agricultural space to actually successfully farm in their own homes. So, he was very interested in being involved. He did need to meet with his team on Monday to kind of talk it through, but felt that he could probably do it. So that was what I can say about Abel. Now, Elaine Wang, who I did speak with in the past, I can't remember who may have followed up with her, but I do recall she was interested, worried about her time commitment. She does have a public sector job, so daytime meetings, I think, are difficult for her. Did anyone want to speak about Elaine?
I was the one who talked to her originally, and I think she would be awesome and bring something, really special to the group, but she was really hesitant about the time commitment. So I think doing a follow-up yes or no from her would be necessary. And I'm happy to do that if that's the case.
Yeah, and I guess what I want us to think about, to begin by saying every single person who we've reached out to and who's been nominated, I feel personally like we should have a strategy of engaging all of them in the concentric circle that's just beyond this small group, which is going to be meeting with great intention on a really regular basis. But that I kind of don't want to tell anyone, oh, we can't engage you, because we're going to very actively and proactively. So that's where I start. First of all, let me ask, is there anyone that we've reached out to that somehow we've missed on this spreadsheet? Please share. Okay, think we've got this. And I'm now interested in hearing from the group. We have 3, maybe 4 candidates, and we are at this moment, how many people? I think we're like 10 people. And we're being it's being suggested to us to stick with sort of 12. I wonder what the pleasure of the group is. I mean, part of me is so excited that we have folks as broadly diverse as we have already, and then if we could include, frankly, I wouldn't mind including all three. Jane, I don't know if we would have a slap on the wrist for being as big as 13, but any comments I see, or whether, Jane, you think it's admissible or really not. I guess I'm interested in your advice there. Abby, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to make sure, Sue, in the question that you asked a moment ago, that Aiko Schaefer had been on the list, but had communicated that they were not able to commit the time to be on the committee, but would be interested in being engaged in some other useful, helpful way. So I know they're not being considered for a seat, but I didn't want to lose track of including them in some further outreach. So sorry for the interruption on that.
No, that's good clarification. Sarah, I saw you want to speak. I want to say Sarah and I have been trying to narrow the list to the people we need to decide about today, but there are many others on the list with whom we've reached out to or communicated. Sarah, did you want to share?
I was just going to say I have the larger list, and she's even on here. We just have hidden some fields. We've only left on here who we needed to talk to.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Jane, can you help us whether we really should max out at 12 or if we might be able to go as far as 13?
Oh, I mean, I think it was really guidance. And I think with the feeling of the council and the steering committee that smaller would aid in just administration and moving forward with coordination of a large group. But I feel like there's no slap on the wrist, and if there's a strong case to be made for additional support with an additional member, then by all means, carry on with it.
Thank you. Chris, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, as a steering committee member, I would say no problem at all. And also, given that this specific committee is going to have liaisons to other committees, I think it'd be helpful to, in this case, I don't think it's going to be ungainly and could be helpful to have more than fewer.
Great. I also want to share that I had a communication with Abby of the Ag Subcommittee with respect to Judy Dow, who was somebody also we had reached out to, and Kelly, I know you in particular have, and she has actually been given a seat on their Ag Committee. So I think we would be happy if she was so designated, and then we feel like she's well positioned. And I think folks know that Beverly does represent our Native communities, and so at least we're not losing that perspective. And obviously, the Ag Committee would be gaining that perspective. And by the way, when I did talk with Abby, I asked about Abel, who I had just been in touch with, and she was so excited to hear about the engagement from Migrant Justice. And she expressed a concept that I think is really important to share, which is the Just Transition Subcommittee shouldn't be like holding all of the diversity, but in fact, sharing with the other subcommittees. So to your point, Chris, I think the idea of having Abel who could also connect with the Ag Subcommittee might be a good way of thinking about their participation. So I guess I'm interested in where people would like to go from here. Do we want to do at least the three, Aris, Kaya, and Abel? And that would take us to 13, and hope to continue to engage Elaine very actively in the next concentric circle out. Yeah, thank you. Sarah's pointing out the issue of labor. I did want to raise that. We heard from public comment that we were not including a very important sector that we need to, which is labor and working people who are potentially going to be very affected by sort of the changes in our economy. So we did remember that Danielle was on the original list. Now, what do would people want to maybe reach out? I don't really know, Danielle, or have any thoughts about how and whether to include. I think it would be extremely wise and potentially really not a positive thing to not have someone from the union community on our council or our subcommittee. Any thoughts about that?
I agree, Sue.
I agree as well, given the fact that Just Transitions, its roots really is in the labor community. Having a representative to represent those voices, I think, is critical.
Yeah, and Sue, I think also there's some benefit to having and the subcommittee in terms of as we think about the networks that we can reach and as part of the engagement strategies in particular, I think that will be really helpful. And especially since we just found out we won't get a slap on the wrist, I'm very in favor of taking the time to reach out and see if she would join us.
Okay. Would anyone like to take that exciting opportunity to do so? Any volunteers to staff or members? Well, does this mean I have to assign it? All right. Abby, would you be able to reach out to Danielle on our behalf?
I was just going to volunteer before you had to do the task of assigning. I'd be happy to.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
You know, I think it's likely that there will be meetings where everyone isn't able to be there. And I guess I'm much on this subcommittee of all subcommittees, be more inclusive than not. So, you know, it's possible that Abel won't have time. It's possible that Abel might make more sense over in ag. But let's invite, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to suggest we invite at least Aris, Kaya, and Abel, and also reach out to Danielle. And I would recommend that if Danielle doesn't have the ability to do it, Abby, ask if there's someone else who might from the union community, and including, if at all possible, maybe in southern Vermont. I think the AFL also, or maybe it's AFSCME, is in Rutland. So I just have a feeling that, you know, if we have that opportunity, getting the geographic diversity would also be great. Liz, you reached out to Elaine. I agree. Elaine is wonderful. Maybe what I'll do is I'll call her back and talk with her about being that next concentric circle out, since I kind of started the ball rolling with her. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think she'll listen to you. She'll take your word.
She would listen to you too. Okay, so let me just say that we're going to proceed with these recommendations, including Abby following up with Danielle. We'll hear back from Abel and assume that we will proceed with at least 13 members with this construction. And I guess I'd like to offer any comments or concerns from the group. And I'm sorry to be keeping on moving so quickly.
Yeah, no, so I think that sounds great. Can I just confirm who's reaching back out to Judy just to make sure she knows that we feel great about her joining the Ag Committee? I think she was feeling a little stuck in the middle. What's that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, Kelly, were you the original connector to her?
Yes, I was. I'd be happy to reach back out. And I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing Sarah. You were just saying to reach out and let her know that we're really pleased that she's going to be on the Ag Committee, that we were excited to have her on ours, but we think this is great, basically. Is that the gist? Thanks.
Exactly.
And can we confirm the next steps with you, Jane? I think, do we need the steering committee's approval to add these final 3 members? And so really we're recommending them to you, and I'll send them in an email.
Yeah, Chris, maybe you can back me up on what we just heard at the steering committee meeting, but the steering committee has approved all the candidates that were submitted as saying yes to this point. And the final ones now will need to go to the steering committee again, but I suspect that's somewhat ceremonial.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Great. Sarah, if you don't mind taking that down and we can all see one another, but I know I'm going to ask you to put something up again. But I just I just want to apologize to the new members that we're kind of rolling through this so quickly, but we're really trying to get our group established and really so that we can get taking on the topics of the day. And if possible, if you have the ability to be on screen so we can see one another, it really helps to feel, that connection. I know not everybody has that ability with their internets, et cetera. So there are two remaining questions, one of which I think will wait until we have the full complement, which is we wanted to add an additional chair, and I don't know if we are then not a co-chair, but a tri-chair, I don't know, from the BIPOC community. So we wanted to sort of pause or just remember that we're going to expand the leadership of it so that it is not all white. And then we also were asked to have one of our members join the cross-sector, is that what it's called, cross-sector group? And I believe we have a volunteer to do that. Am I right, Kelly?
Yes, that is correct. I am volunteering. I think that the steering committee and cross-sector mitigation will have to confirm that that's all good, because I'm offering to actually be on that committee as my, as a second committee. At the very least, I think don't see why they would tell me I can't be sort of a passive liaison, but that's the hope. So that would be my volunteering for that position.
And I'll just say that the steering committee actually took action on that already, Kelly, just previously, and supported you joining that committee. And I think I heard at the cross-sector mitigation that they were psyched to have you. So
great, thanks for the update.
Yay. Okay, so we don't have to approve Kelly. She's already advanced beyond us. Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. That is awesome. All right, and I think that we can, unless there's any other comments about membership, we're probably going to be a complete group a week from now, and that'll be a beautiful thing. And I love the various communities that we are connecting to through this outreach effort. I'm really pleased. So the next thing we have on our agenda relates to a topic that I sort of advocated for, which is to think about engagement a little bit more broadly than right now. The DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, has launched forward quickly on sort of a campaign and an outreach effort so that the work of this committee, the word gets out. And I've voiced a concern that we not wait and that we start doing something very proactive and intentional as soon as possible, and in particular with communities that haven't really been engaged in this process and aren't generally normally engaged in this process. And I think that's part of the point of our subcommittee. So Chris and I, along with Amanda and Liz, met, and we did put together a little document of our thinking. Sarah, if you can put that up. And what I'd like to ask, if the committee kind of feels comfortable with the way we're going, and maybe I'll have Chris walk us through it, so I'm not talking, but we were thinking that we'd like to advance this recommendation to the steering committee from this Just Transition Subcommittee to really request a significant and real investment in early and ongoing public engagement to key groups. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. So the idea is, the big concern is that we really need to talk about engagement for the entire, and Sue and everybody else, if I get this, if I wander too far, feel for what we talked about, rein me back in. But basically, we really need to think about engagement for the entire life cycle of this process, and really focus on three groups in particular, which are, and can you scroll down just a little bit? I'm trying to remember the exact terms that we used. who's driving the bus. Let's see. So marginalized communities, vulnerable communities, and impacted sectors. Defined as marginalized communities would be those economically, socially, racially, and those underserved and underrepresented groups. Vulnerable groups at greatest risk for impact from climate-related impacts such as poor health, extreme weather events, and landscape and ecosystem changes. And then impacted sectors, industries, and economic sectors and groups at risk for job losses. Some of these might include farming, heating / hydrocarbon sales, automotive industry, et cetera. And so the idea would be to bring consultants in to figure out, to help us, think through how to best engage with these groups, and how to do that throughout this process. So the proposal, the strategy is there and bulletized. Have education engagement on the purpose and intentions of the council, education on climate change and its broad effects on human health, the environment and the economy, disproportionate effects on marginalized communities, climate-driven vulnerabilities, especially related to natural disasters, and likely impacts across economic sectors and groups, inclusion of public ideas, opinions, and local expertise into decision-making processes, especially related to impact avoidance and mitigation, and outreach on resulting policy and navigating new realities and opportunities from the Climate Action Plan. And we were thinking this would not be an inexpensive effort. It would require a lot of time on behalf of the consultant. And the reason we're talking about consultants is, this subcommittee and, the larger council will definitely advise the consultant, but we need people with the bandwidth to actually do what we advise. And a number of us, we all have things that we're doing in addition to the council and the subcommittees. And some of us are even on multiple subcommittees in addition to the council. And so we really need the expanded capacity to not only help us think through, but also execute the direction that we decide to go. So is that an okay summary, Sue? Did I get that right?
Yes, and Liz or Amanda, do you have anything you wanted to add or clarify? I would just add that one of the real reasons there's concurrent things going on. One is a sense that we all know that marginalized communities haven't been involved in this conversation, and if we are here to provide an equity lens, we have to be very proactive in engaging and in new tactics, not in traditional. And that's what's so wonderful about the group we have, not just in this circle, but the concentric circles around us that will tap into different communities of concern. But we also feel like we have to do a particular outreach to those communities who are vulnerable to the disruption of climate change, as well as we were talking about earlier, labor groups or people who will have likely disruption in their economic and livelihood. So those are why we thought it's important to actually focus on those and have strategies from consultants who do this work, who can actually come up with unique ways of approaching this difficult and new endeavor, as well as hopefully experience with working with these communities, which I think is going to be essential. So the question to you all is comments, reflections, and importantly, do you support this idea of asking the steering committee to invest in this kind of an engagement process? Go ahead, Jane.
So I guess I just to say, well, I'm not a voting member, but I wholeheartedly support this. And my only worry is getting out in front. And while I firmly agree that the sort of misstep perhaps of the RFP around outreach and marketing and framing it too much in those boxes, trying to backpedal that and not getting everything we wanted into that RFP. I will just say that public engagement is a large component of that RFP, which closes tomorrow. And I've had like nonstop questioning around what are we asking of the consultants who are putting forward proposals in their work for public engagement and their ongoing work with this subcommittee, meaning that they all have asked, well, how should they be budgeting their time and their proposal in order to do the job of public engagement and working with you all. So I've been setting the expectation that they would be sitting in on these meetings every week and early on in the process, coming up with a reasonable expectation in concert with this committee on what early and ongoing public engagement would look like. Recognizing that, you know, that budget for that work, we've been thinking about $200,000 for that contract. And that's certainly above and beyond what we need for outreach and marketings, but maybe not enough to do the engagement that you all want to do. But I worry about sort of getting out of sync with before we have that person selected. And as I think you know, it was you and Sarah and others too on this committee, but I tapped you and Sarah and you got an email from our director of communications around serving on that selection through that process to select that person on contract. And so this is all just to say that I hear you. I think perhaps we didn't do a good enough job in that RFP, but I do think the intent of that RFP was to cover public engagement. So I'm not quite sure yet, like what the order is of like, do we wait and suss out if that RFP did the job and we're going to get what we need out of that contractor? Or do we move forward with this independent of that at the same time? So it's just a timing question for me partially. So I just want to put that out there. So
thank you. That's helpful. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I had a question about to Jane. The RFP that you're putting out for $200,000, how many people do you expect that to cover? Over how much time and how many hours a week for those people?
I don't know the answer to that. So I shouldn't say that the RFP was put out for 200,000. There was a scope of work included in the RFP that included meeting ongoing with the Just Transitions Committee. It included the robust public engagement at the points in the climate action plan of June and October that we've spoken to it. It included standing up a website. It included direct marketing and outreach around the work. And if you don't all have that, I can share that with you all so you can see that. And then the backstory of that is the way the budget was put in for the budget adjustment that the governor just signed last week. And so the $1 million extra we got for contractual services, the way that budget was framed was 200,000 of that money was going to go towards engagement, outreach, and marketing. And so I'm not sure where another $75,000 or $100,000 would come from, because that budget was sort of made with the expectation that that's what it would cost. But I think I alluded to this at your last meeting, as you embarked on this consideration that you worked on this past week. 800,000 of the total money is considered for technical services right now. And maybe we don't need all 800,000 because we haven't done those RFPs yet. So that's a big number. And maybe there's more room to provide more money for outreach and engagement. So I don't want you to say, oh, well, we only budgeted 200,000 and there's not going to be enough. I think there could be more, and I don't have a handle on how much more there is yet.
And can I just clarify that 200,000 is for what length of time?
The intent is through the development of the plan, so through December.
Jane, was it, and it's possible I didn't understand when we did get a slideshow, I had the impression that was kind of going to be beginning sort of in June, when we have sort of our first iteration of a plan of some sort to then go out and get feedback. as opposed to what I think we're trying to do. And if it can all be folded into the, and your suggestion that maybe we should see what we get and then piggyback or address it once if it's deficient in this sense. But I think our goals are a little bit different in terms of really just starting very soon to get the word out on what the heck this Global Warming Solutions Act even is and what we're trying to accomplish in new ways is all.
No, yeah, I tried to rework the proposal, and I'm recognizing I might not have done as best as I could, but I tried to rework it to include early public engagement also. Knowing that we didn't change the scope of how much money we had available. We just asked for more services within the same RFP. But the intent is as soon as they're on board, which will be likely, I think the March 15th was the deadline that the Director of Communications proposed for selection of a vendor for that contract. So by the end of March, we would have somebody on board working with you all right from the onset, attending your meetings and thinking about public engagement. Did it include focus groups and all that? I don't know. I think there'll be a range of budgets that are put forward. Nobody has asked us how with the facilitator. Everybody asked, well, what does the state anticipate awarding in a contract? And some of that has been asked and some hasn't with this. So we'll get a range of budgets, and maybe someone says, who's very good, says we could do all this work for 150,000, knowing that we could still build out to 200,000 in the contract.
Sarah? Thanks, Jane. Sarah, we're not hearing you.
That's because I double muted myself. Sorry about that. I really like the idea of I think this is really helpful. I just know the time to issue an RFP and go through a process and bring someone on board, it takes time. I like the idea of seeing if we can use who is coming on board through the RFP that's already been issued to support early engagement, and then think about supplementing it with additional services for specific additional strategies that we may be able to develop with this new consultant as a thought partner, but they may not have the capacity to implement. So I actually really love that the team that put the proposal, I'm pointing to it on my other screen, put the proposal together that we looked at. I think that was really great in terms of helping us think about some of the goals and who we want to reach and kind of pushing that out there. So I really like that as a jump start, and I like the idea of trying to work with the consultant that will come on board through the existing RFP.
I think I am also I think this is fine. I think the work we did was helpful. And I think we've got a good document there that maybe maybe we should at least share with whoever is on the group that's charged with receiving the RFP. And if there was an invitation, I'm not sure I got that, but that's great. I think I definitely probably misunderstood when I thought that everything was beginning at June. So unless anyone else thinks we need to press on, I'm happy to sort of withdraw the idea that we advance a new proposal at this time and see how what we receive meets our objectives and go from there. Any other thoughts on that?
I'm comfortable with that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Because I think it'll be, especially once we see what the actual scope of work will be decided is going to be for whoever's brought on board. That'll tell us, I think, how this might, where the gaps are and what holes might need to be filled. So I think it's also just helpful to help folks think that we're thinking about this over the very long haul. So that's, sorry, thinking out loud.
All right. Well, I'm going to just leap forward on one related topic before we kind of talk about the equity lens issue, which is simply to say that maybe what this committee, our group should do very quickly is I'm feeling uncomfortable with the energy that got put forward with nominations and wanting to quickly engage that next concentric circle, and wanted to put forward an idea that Sarah and I had germinated earlier today to just sort of have a marker in our mind that in early April, we will have some virtual engagement with at least this concentric circle. And we don't need to decide right now what it is we're going to accomplish with that group. It's possibly related to, you know, what we learned from the public engagement process and other things. But I just sort of feel like I want to make sure all of those people who were interested in have an opportunity to engage, and not just through an email that they receive. So I didn't know whether other people feel that that's a good idea.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what the good idea is.
To have a virtual a virtual engagement date, you know, an engagement, an active engagement through Zoom or whatever with the folks who are interested in our work and who we want to. I have this vision, and it doesn't have to be, but that we're a team, a tight team here, but that there's another team pretty close to us that we keep involved.
Yeah, I know, because you know, the UVM people are, you know, I'm still kind of trying to keep them engaged, and they do have, you know, graduate students and stuff who are interested. But I wonder whether we just want to do it during a meeting. You think you want a longer period of time outside of a meeting? Is that what it is?
Well, let's see. Maybe it'll be a first meeting in April, but it might need to be in the evening and a bit bigger. Yeah. But maybe it's just, inviting people to our meeting. That's fine too. Sarah?
Yeah, and right, I could see a lot of different things. I guess what I'd love to see this committee do, you know, there were 300 names of people who somebody threw their name in the hat, or they put their own name in the hat to be on a subcommittee. Some of them were reached out to and they declined, or it wasn't going to work. Some of them didn't have anyone reach out to them, and that feels like a missed opportunity. So I would, in the very least, love to see, if it would be all right with the steering committee, love to see our committee just take the lead in just emailing all those folks that we have contact with, you know, like soon, and saying, hey, we know that somebody volunteered you, or you were interested in being on a subcommittee, and thank you for wanting to be engaged in this work, and stay tuned, there'll be more opportunities, just to not lose the opportunity. So I would love to see us do that, and I think Sue's idea is sort of looking out to say, let's aim to do something in early April that will be something concrete where people can engage with it. I like that too, even though we don't know what that it is yet. Maybe we can at least do some outreach this week.
I think that was suggested. Commissioner Walk of DC and others really thought that suite of nominees was a great first step for outreach and broadening the sort of tent and as a body of folks for you guys to be thinking about with your work. So I think that sounds really wonderful.
So I'm wondering, Jane, might it be appropriate for an email to come from you on behalf of the entire council to thank people for either being nominated or recognize them for being nominated, thank them for being interested, letting them know we will be following up and that they should look forward to hearing from us soon with more opportunities. Maybe that's a way to do it.
Yep. I look forward to entering 300 emails into my email address book. But yes, I was half joking, but yes, you're right. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Maybe there's staff support. I don't know. But hopefully it's easier than that. Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet and it will be easy.
Can I ask a question about that, actually, about staff support specifically? Are the staff support, have they actually been granted like certain number of hours a week from their jobs to do work for this committee? Or is it all volunteer the way we are? Or like, what do you mean by what is the staff support? Is it just nice people being willing to go overtime, or is it actually like something that we can say, oh, well, we'd really like you to do your.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say we are hiring a program technician who will actually do administrative work on your behalf. And that's just like tied up in state bureaucracy, reappointments of positions from one department to another in order to post it. But like, fingers crossed, we'll post it next week. And so in the next month, hopefully someone will be offered a job who would help with all of that administrative aspects. For now, Melissa and I are doing our best, and Melissa, while she serves the Secretary Young, is doing her best to help me administer the work that you're all doing. But she will phase out completely, and this program will take over of administration. As far as state staff who have been assigned to you, my understanding is that I can only probably speak for A&R, but the expectation is this is work for them when they're here. But of course they still have other jobs that they have to fit in, and how that all happens. But my understanding is people who clearly, like Carrie, who would have been great on this subcommittee, but clearly didn't have the capacity to serve, stepped off. And hopefully Liz in her place has stepped on because she had some capacity to bring during work time. And perhaps that would be a good thing to discern from other agency staff who are here.
Yeah, as a state employee and support staff, I can corroborate with Jane's description that this is expected to be part of my sort of additional job duties to support the subcommittee in the ways that you need, in addition to the other parts of my job that I had before this. But doing this out of interest and passion and desire to be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Abby. It's not really work for me. One, because I'm an AmeriCorps member and it's technically service, but my capacity is much more wide open than probably everyone else on this call. So yes, please, I'm happy to help. I'm eager to help and be involved as much as I can. So call me, email me, whatever it is.
Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't sure what this entailed. I was just told by the secretary that I was chosen to staff this committee, and happy to do so. The time constraints are real. 25% of our staff is working as contact tracers, and we're struggling. But 4 to 6 hours a week is something that I can commit and work, off hours and try to, get some assistance from my staff if I run up against a deadline. But something like that is probably doable. But yeah, I don't know what to commit to or what the expectation is. So I'm trying to figure that out as we go through this conversation.
Great. That's very helpful. Riley, are you on with us?
Yeah, well, I just want to be clear that I'm not planning to staff the committee, but I do regard myself as a resource to the committee. I'm a deputy commissioner of the Department of Public Service, and I'll be in the wings following and helping to kind of liaise with other, other partners in the state on what this committee is doing and what they should be thinking about, and increasing their awareness of the activities of this committee. But I am a resource, and I'll try to attend pretty much every meeting. Okay.
That's fantastic. Does that help, Jennifer? Answer. There's a lot behind us. It's great. I don't know who RA is, but go ahead. No? I thought that was a hall. Okay. Oh, that was Riley. I got it. Okay. I'm seeing All right, so I am going to keep moving here because we wanted to just touch base on one of our tasks that we had talked about was thinking about resources that may be available for us to begin our thinking around what does it mean to sort of have the equity lens. One of our tasks as a subcommittee is to be of service to the other subcommittees to sort of provide that equity lens. And what I want to do is just mention and introduce to you, we at Capstone have a wonderful intern, college intern from Dartmouth, whose name is Ellie Curtis. I believe she's on the call. And I've asked her to take a stab at trying to look a little more deeply at the work that's been done by our neighboring states, some of whom we met with as a council previously, Maine, who's about a year ahead of us in this process, New York, who's been at it for a while, as has Massachusetts. But all of those three states have this just equity lens approach. So I thought it might help us to have Ellie do a sort of scan and a review and then present that perhaps at the next meeting. Ellie, if you're there and available, present yourself and people can, there she is. And if that's something people think we could benefit from, I wanted to just put that on our agenda next time and maybe just hear any thoughts that you might have about that since Ellie is here.
Ellie, I think you're muted.
Ellie, you muted, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction, Sue. I'm a junior at Dartmouth College right now studying government and environmental policy. So I'm bringing some research background to this position. And so far, yeah, I've been looking into what other states have been, how they've been thinking about environmental justice in their GWSAs. And I think it's just important to remember that equity has to be a focus within each step of the process. So with identification of the communities we want to focus on. So that's in like mapping projects, and then also developing a framework to assess each recommendation from the different working groups. And then, well, to begin with, like participation, as you guys have been discussing beforehand. So hopefully I'll get a few minutes next meeting to discuss some of my more concrete findings.
Awesome. That's great. And if anyone has any thoughts or direction, we did avail Ellie of, I think at our last meeting, a resource was brought to our attention, and any of the other resources we've handed over to her. But if anyone has other directions or thoughts, that it would be helpful for her to hear now.
I think that's great, Ellie. If you can share what some other states have already done and we can learn from their work, I think that's a great starting place for us. That would be great. And even as we learn about that, I'm thinking about how we might even be able to invite someone who did that work from the other state to come to this group and present. So I really love the idea of doing like a little, almost like taster presentation next week to kind of see what's out there. I'd love to hear from some of our new subcommittee members what they think of that idea as well.
I see Virginie. What would you like to share?
I mean, yeah, I'm really curious to see what Ellie is going to come up with. And, I would like to have kind of a baseline of what is being done in the other states and see how this can be applicable to us. What we can add to it. So yeah, I would be curious to see that.
Great. Anyone else? And I want to just say, feel free to just jump in if you have a comment or raise your hand. Chris, I see your hand. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm that's going through my head a lot is, and maybe we could use the consultant framing that we developed to help guide this, is data to actually help and experience of other states to help guide the identification of some of these groups that we need to reach out to. And I'm not just talking about like where BIPOC people live, or necessarily mapping, identifying like specifically who's beyond, like who's living in flood hazard areas and river corridors and that kind of thing. But one area that I'm particularly have in mind is, and I grew up, I'll just preface this. I worked in sustainable agriculture and with farm communities, and one of the reasons why I got really into this was working with Black farm communities in the South. Is the intersection between policy changes and economic sectors where there's already a lot of structural change. And so I grew up in coal country. I use that as an example. Oftentimes, what'll get involved into the policy discussion is, well, if you do that, we'll lose coal jobs, without actually looking at the structural changes that have caused massive loss of coal jobs before you're ever talking about clean water or climate change or anything else. And one of the things I'd be real curious about is how other states have kind of addressed this intersection of where, it's not just, say, for example, that the people who are in the job of processing hydrocarbons and selling them, you're going to be impacted, but already structurally within the industry, you're already being impacted. And so there are going to be some sectors where the economic impacts and also benefits are going to be are going to be informed not only by the changes in how we use energy, how we address the climate resilience issues, and that kind of thing, but also places where structurally there are already massive changes on the horizon. And it'd be really good to see how other states have addressed that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, I think, just within the realm of climate impacts or climate councils. There's a really good podcast out there called Timber Wars. And one of the last episodes of the podcast gets to when conservation groups and loggers and mill owners all finally sat down with each other, got out into the fields, and as a mill, one of the last mills was about to shut down, everybody unified to fight to keep that mill open, because one of the things that the conservation groups realized was, in order to maintain the forest and reduce the fuel loads, that mill had to stay open. It also were some of the only jobs remaining in a community. Anyway, it was just an intersection of a lot of different pieces. And so I think there are a lot of other kind of examples out there where people have dealt with structural changes in the industry that could help inform this larger conversation that we're supposed to have.
Thanks. I think that's a very interesting perspective that maybe, Ellie, you can be doing some thinking about, and we all can. And of course, that goes beyond the New England states to much broader sort of scan. But let's see what we can come up with, because to your point, we got to be thinking differently. And we're lucky enough let's learn from others rather than reinventing perhaps the wheels that don't work well. I want to move on because we want to give time for public comment. And before so doing, just checking in about our next meeting. We're hopeful that this is a time that we can meet next week. And maybe our goal will be to have a regular meeting, but we want to make sure we have the full complement of our members before we make that. But can we just commit to meeting this time next week? And we kind of last minute went from 4 to 5:30. Do people prefer that or prefer the 3:30 to 5? Either one. Well, then I'm going to stick to the 4 to 5:30 if I don't hear any problems with that. Later is usually better for me. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Fantastic. That works for me. Great. So the other thing I just want to go through, we're going to invite the larger group. We're going to need to discuss our charter at our next meeting to get a little more detail. We haven't really gotten there on this. I hope we're going to give time to meet one another a little more deeply. Jane, I wrote something down, Jane review process. I don't know what that means anymore.
Well, we'll have the cheat sheet on administrative process.
Administrative process. Now, and that's distinct from the open meeting law review and the Public Records Act, or that's one and the same?
Different.
Okay, so those are 4 things that we're going to do. And we're going to have Ellie do the scan, and maybe we'll sort of start with that, or we'll see what works with Ellie's schedule. Does that make sense? And is there anything we're missing that people want to bring to our next meeting before we move on to our public comment? Okay. Well, we'll get an agenda out to you. We'll get the notes to this meeting out to you. And let's turn now to the public. Is there anyone who has comments to share with us today? And if you do, please raise your hand or just, I guess, show up so we can see you or hear from you. I am not seeing anything. Okay. I don't think we're having comments from the public. Is there any concluding comments, thoughts that anyone wants to share?
I will, as a matter of course, just for process, I will send out the meeting invite, and I will, when the agenda and the minutes are ready, I will go ahead and attach them to the meeting invite just to make that easy for us all. And we did, if people, I think Jane is going to be setting up new subcommittee members with the State of Vermont email. Does that happen? A partner email? You have.
I can't believe that you're the first one to bring that up, and no, it hasn't. Yes, somebody will be. So
she will be, right? Not Jane herself, but people will get a Vermont.gov email, and I'm happy to include your personal email and your Vermont.gov email in the meeting invite. Just let me know your preference if that works for people. So anyway.
And Jane, did you already give them a heads up about the training that they're going to be receiving, or the request to kind of train themselves and open meeting law? You already did that?
Yeah, thanks. I did, Chris.
Great.
And just to put underscore that, you will receive from Jane an email with some stuff to really read and review with respect to what it means to be a public body, what the laws are around our communication with one another that must always have be open to the public. So there's some important laws for you to sort of understand as a member of an official public body such as this. And so we'll ask you to look at that, and then we'll talk about it at our next meeting as well.
And there's going to be some information in there too about communicating by email that's not necessarily intuitive, about that email going back is a form of conversation, and there's specific rules that govern how you do that. So just if it feels like things aren't necessarily intuitive or feel like they're clumsy, they are, but it's in the interest of openness. So just if you don't live this every day, it can be a little complicated. And I'm excited about this group. I mean, I think it's if we the approach that I feel like I feel like we're taking to this kind of, again, looking at inclusion throughout the entire life cycle of this process could help really inform processes, not just related to the Climate Council, but just how the state has these conversations, period, going forward. So we're pioneering this, I guess, but with this group that's here, that's so well informed and has been involved in these processes before, I don't know, I'm very, very excited about what the future holds.
Nice.
All right. Last moment for any observations. Thank you all so much for your time and interest, and we will be in touch with next steps. I'm looking forward to our next meeting where we'll even be more robust and more diverse. And I hope everyone stays safe and has a lovely, I guess it's not the weekend yet, but it's almost Friday. All right. Have a good end of your week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.